We have an opening quotation that takes us into the topic. The quotation is Cleopatra's upstaging of Antony in theatrical terms, in military terms, and ultimately in sexual terms confirms the upset of equality in the play, and we consider Cleopatra the character with the most control. Now to the topic. Judge, which means decide, whether Cleopatra upstages, which can mean outshines or takes attention away from Antony onto her, to the extent that she upsets the equality in the play. Now, in other words, if she's upsetting the equality in the play, the equality of status or power is being challenged and she is more powerful than Antony. Okay, we're going to have to judge to what extent this is true. Does she ultimately emerge as the character with the most control? Now, even if a question sounds confusing, you've got to try and break it down. It's clear from the way that Shakespeare favors Cleopatra. He allows her death and the planning of her suicide to outmaneuver Octavius Caesar to be the focal point at the end of this play. He challenges the initial Roman view of Cleopatra's tawny front, the gypsy, the strumpet. He challenges that by showing her strength, particularly towards the end of the play. And obviously he juxtaposes her strength by showing Antony's weaknesses. Okay, just remember, with this type of essay, you cannot exceed 500 words. It's not about retelling the story. You have to have a tightly constructed argument. You have to substantiate that argument with close textual references from the play. Another thing to bear in mind, Antony and Cleopatra are real people who existed, and there's a lot of historical information about them. Shakespeare is giving his interpretation, dramatic rendering of their story. You need to base your arguments on what Shakespeare is giving you. That is very important. You can't bring in random historical facts. We are analyzing Shakespeare's play. Okay. Your introduction must set up the entire argument. You have to take a stance. I want you to think of a debater who stands up, clearly says what he's going to be arguing, and then goes on to signpost his argument, clearly showing 3 or 4 key points that he's going to focus on and substantiate. Telling or saying something means nothing unless you prove it. So your substantiation is very important in this type of essay. The intro itself, you need about 2 to 3 sentences, not longer than that, please. And you've got to refer to the keywords in the actual question, in the topic. Okay, so here's an example of an introduction. Cleopatra, the proud, self-assured Queen of Egypt, challenges the Roman notion of gender, upsetting the equality in the play, and ultimately emerging as the character with the most control. Clear evidence of her control is displayed in the planning of her own death in a bid to outmaneuver Octavius Caesar and join her beloved Antony. Antony's weakness in the play serves to heighten the audience's perception of Cleopatra's power. Okay, so what I did with my intro is I thought, okay, I've got to go to the topic. I've got to show that I'm going to address key issues, what my angle is going to be. My stance is that absolutely Cleopatra, without doubt, upstages Antony in this play. Then what I've done is I immediately, in that introduction, pointed out that I'm going to use Cleopatra's death and the planning of her death as an important point in my argument. And then in this essay, I've also indicated from my introduction that there will be examples of Antony's weaknesses that will obviously show Cleopatra's strengths. Okay, by comparison. And that is now my introduction that I have set up. So after you've done this, a good thing to do is to actually make a plan, okay, where you set out your paragraphs or your main points. I find it easier to just set out 3 or 4 of my main points and not necessarily pinpoint paragraphs, because some of the points might flow into 2 paragraphs. Your paragraphs in this type of essay, they're driven, punchy, short paragraphs. Right, before we get to the actual plan for the essay, I have already gone through some of the tips. You can just read them on your own. But just some sideline information to help you for trials and finals. It is important to consider what Shakespeare's view of the characters actually is and how he positions the audience to perceive characters. Because then no matter what topic you get, you're going to be able to present a strong argument based on this text. So you must understand that Shakespeare embraces Cleopatra's power. I think he enjoys the fact that she challenges conventional definitions of gender, her commanding presence, her theatrical nature. He shows that she's a woman who embraces her sexuality, which would have been quite shocking at the time as well. But he really enjoys playing with her character and then challenging his audience to go from viewing her in a one-dimensional way at the start of the play, seeing how she manipulates Antony and ends up not listening to the messenger, trying to prevent him from going back to Rome, and then how she evolves. And by the end of the play, she just outsmarts Octavius Caesar, deciding she will not be paraded through Rome, through the streets of Rome, and humiliated in that way, and she will die on her own terms. Notice too that he balances her manipulative nature by showing, this is Shakespeare's depiction, that she actually does love Antony. And when she dies, in her final moments, she says, "Husband, I come." She is calling Antony her husband, her soulmate, and I think Shakespeare's interpretation there helps us to balance the different aspects of Cleopatra's character and makes her more endearing. So be careful of also, some people want to present her as completely scheming, that, she deliberately targeted Antony because he's weak and that way she could control the triumvirate or whatever. That is not what Shakespeare is telling us. I think that anyone going with that interpretation of Shakespeare's play has missed the point. Right, then just notice with the men, Lepidus is just foolish, all the talk of crocodiles and what have you. You'll remember that with the party on the ship. Octavius Caesar, just cold and scheming, offers up his sister in an attempt to control Antony. And in Antony, indecisive and impulsive and reckless, but yet endearing and charismatic. Don't forget the loyalty of his men. He shows integrity, in dealing with his men. He immediately forgives Enobarbus and understands, takes the blame for turning this nobleman into a traitor. He says it's his own fault because he's been such a terrible leader. So it's just interesting to understand Shakespeare's perception of characters before you construct your own arguments. Here is an example of a plan. As mentioned earlier, my introduction, I take the stance that Cleopatra upstages Antony and has the most control. Proof, I decided that I'm going to start by focusing on Cleopatra's planned death, where she outsmarts Caesar and prevents him from dragging her through the streets of Rome. She dies on her own terms, versus Antony's suicide that doesn't actually go according to plan. Then I've mentioned keywords from the quote that you're given before the topic: military, sexual, and theatrical upstaging of Antony. So looking at the military idea, I think Cleopatra upstages Antony in the sense that she dominates his common sense by encouraging him to do battle at sea. He's very impulsive. He should know better. He's the general, and land battle is his strength. But to impress her, I mean, you know, that weakness on his part, he agrees to the sea battle and then follows her when she retreats. Then the Cleopatra's sexual allure, she's like a real magnet, versus Antony's weakness, unable to stay away from her. Now, it's clear she embraces her sexuality. Inababa says, you know, age cannot wither her, nor custom stale her infinite variety. It doesn't matter how much time you spend with her, there's always something new and exciting about her. And it doesn't matter that she's aging, she's just so beautiful. Now, clearly, Antony is unable to resist this. It's part of the reason he is not an equal to her in status and power. You know, originally the trouble with Fulvia and his brother occurs because he is not in Rome. He is with Cleopatra. And then, of course, Octavia, he agrees to this marriage and makes himself vulnerable now to Octavius Caesar. And but then ultimately, you know, in the East my pleasure lies, he goes back to Cleopatra. Then Cleopatra's theatrical manipulation, you know, outshining Antony. Oh, she does so many things, but even her pretending to be dead to try to you know, stop Antony from being so angry and wanting to kill her. But of course, she realizes too late that Antony, being the impulsive, emotive person that he is, he might try something drastic like kill himself, and which is, you know, what he does. But it just feels as if she outshines him in every respect. So you could have many arguments. There are many things you could focus on. You don't have to just go with what I've got here. Just remember that, you know, Antony's heart is tied to Cleopatra's rudder. If we're looking at point 2, there's some wonderful quotes that you can bring in, that you can integrate into your paragraphs to add strength to your argument. And yeah, Cleopatra's, on the point of her sexual allure and her sexual control, it's really challenging gender stereotypes of the time. Okay, she's far more dominant than Antony. And yeah, it's as if Antony loses his masculine focus, which would be linked to Rome, in the presence of Cleopatra. Now, I mean, ultimately, he is ashamed of himself and he tries to redeem himself through death. But yes, I think being with Cleopatra just threatens his masculinity, which is linked to Rome. He sees his abilities as a soldier as the essence of who he is. And he's stripped of that because of his weakness and his inability to resist Cleopatra, who's proud and self-assured, makes her own decisions. I mean, she crosses over gender roles because by the end of the play, Caesar respects her enough to allow her to be buried by her Antony, he says. So there you go. She's this self-defined woman. She has loyalty from her subjects, you know, powerful. And what is interesting, though, is that she, in death, Shakespeare just makes it sure that we understand that she did actually love Antony, husband, I come. So I waffled a bit at the end there, but anyway, I hope this helps you. Everything of the best. Bye-bye.